You're looking at $50 million, Mr. Tallies. The lawyer's voice echoed across my driveway. I didn't respond. I simply stood there beneath the afternoon sun, staring at the woman who had once sworn she would never leave me. 5 years earlier, Vanessa Tallies had handed me divorce papers because she was tired of being married to a broke man. Now she was standing at the gates of my mansion, demanding a share of $300 million she had absolutely nothing to do with. Life was funny that way. The massive fountain behind me continued flowing peacefully. Several black luxury SUVs sat parked along the circular driveway. The mansion towered above everyone, present like a symbol of everything she once claimed I would never become. Yet there she stood, Vanessa Tallies, my ex-wife. Beside her stood two expensive attorneys, Anthony Brooks and Daniel Carter. Both wore tailored suits that probably cost more than the average family's monthly mortgage payment. Anthony held a leather folder packed with legal documents. Daniel carried a thick contract case under his arm. Neither man looked intimidated. Neither man looked concerned. That told me one thing. Vanessa hadn't told them the whole story. Anthony adjusted his tie before speaking again. Did you hear me, Mr. Tallies? I heard you. And I smiled. A very small smile. The kind that made lawyers nervous. The kind that made investors uncomfortable. The kind that usually meant somebody was about to, discover they weren't nearly as smart as they thought they were. And you think she deserves $50 million? Anthony nodded. My client believes she is entitled to compensation. I slowly looked toward Vanessa. She crossed her arms. Completely serious. Completely confident. Completely unaware of how ridiculous she looked. 5 years. 5 entire years. Not a phone call. Not a message. Not a birthday greeting. Not a single conversation. 5 years of silence. Then suddenly she appeared with lawyers. Not because she missed me. Not because she regretted leaving. Not because she wanted closure. She came because she heard about the money. That was it. $300 million has a funny way of making old relationships reappear. Vanessa took a step forward. I helped build you. The statement almost made me laugh. Instead, I remained calm. You helped build me? Yes. You really believe that? Her expression hardened. I supported you when nobody else did. Now I actually laughed. The sound surprised everyone. Even my security team glanced over, because there was nothing funny about the situation. At least not to them. But to me, it was hilarious. The woman who abandoned me during the worst period of my life was now trying to rewrite history. Anthony stepped forward. Mr. Tallies, I raised my hand. He stopped talking immediately. Not because he wanted to, because confidence recognizes confidence. And he had just realized something. This wasn't going to be a simple negotiation. I looked directly at Vanessa. When was the last time you saw me before today? She hesitated. Neither lawyer answered. Neither could. Because they didn't know. Vanessa finally spoke. 5 years. Correct. I nodded. 5 years. The words hung in the air. 5 years ago, I couldn't afford a house. Silence. 5 years ago, I couldn't afford a luxury SUV. Silence. 5 years ago, I couldn't afford a proper vacation. Silence. 5 years ago, I was sleeping on a mattress sitting directly on the floor. For the first time, Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Good. Because the truth was uncomfortable, especially when people spend years running from it. Anthony cleared his throat. Past circumstances don't change our legal position. I turned toward him. Legal position. Correct. You haven't even seen my legal position. That made both attorneys glance at each other. A tiny reaction. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. I did. Because successful business isn't about what people say. It's about what they reveal when they aren't speaking. Daniel Carter finally spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, measured, careful. Mr. Tallies, perhaps we should discuss this inside. Interesting. Very interesting. Unlike Anthony, Daniel wasn't acting aggressive. He was studying, observing, trying to understand why I wasn't nervous.
Smart man.
Dangerous man. The best attorneys don't talk the most. They listen the most. I nodded slowly. We'll talk. Vanessa looked relieved. She probably thought that meant I was willing to negotiate. She was wrong. Very wrong. Before moving, I looked back toward the mansion. Every time I saw it, I remembered where I started. Because 5 years earlier, my life looked completely different. Back then, there were no luxury vehicles. No mansion. No business empire. No articles written about me. No investors calling my phone. No employees depending on me. Back then, I was simply a husband trying desperately to survive. And failing. The collapse began on a rainy Tuesday morning. I still remember the smell of the conference room. Cheap coffee, printer paper. Anxiety. 30 employees sat waiting while senior management stood near the front. Nobody smiled. Nobody joked. Nobody looked comfortable. Then the announcement came. Restructuring. Budget reductions. Position eliminations. Corporate language designed to make disaster sound professional. 10 minutes later, I was unemployed. I walked back to my desk carrying a cardboard box. My personal belongings barely filled half of it. A family photograph. A notebook. A coffee mug. A few business books. That was all. I sat in my car afterwards staring through the windshield, trying to figure out how to tell Vanessa, trying to figure out how to tell myself. Because losing a job isn't just financial. It attacks your confidence, your identity, your sense of direction, everything. When I arrived home, Vanessa was cooking dinner. She immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? I couldn't answer immediately. The words felt too heavy. Finally I spoke. I lost my job. The room went silent. For a moment, she simply stared. Then she hugged me tightly. It's okay. I still remember those words. It's okay. Back then, she believed them. Back then, we both did. The first month wasn't terrible. We had savings. We had optimism. We had hope. The second month felt different. The third month felt worse. Interviews produced nothing. Applications disappeared into silence. Companies promised callbacks that never arrived. Every rejection felt heavier than the one before. Savings started disappearing. Credit card balances increased. Arguments became more frequent. Stress settled into every corner of our home. Soon, dinner conversations became financial meetings. Bills. Debt. Expenses. Payments. Numbers. Everything became numbers. One evening, I walked into the apartment after another unsuccessful interview. Vanessa sat at the kitchen table surrounded by envelopes. I already knew what they were. Past due notices. She didn't look up. Anything? No. The disappointment on her face hurt more than the rejection itself. Because employers were strangers. Vanessa wasn't. Weeks became months. Months became more than a year. I accepted temporary jobs. Contract work. Night shifts. Anything available. Nothing lasted. Nothing changed. Then something started happening. People stopped asking how I was doing. Instead, they started asking what was wrong with me. Friends disappeared. Family members became distant. Vanessa's relatives became openly critical. One family gathering changed everything. Her uncle laughed while asking if I planned to find a real career. Several relatives joined in. Nobody defended me, not even Vanessa. I noticed. I remembered. And I never forgot. The drive home was silent. The apartment was silent. Everything felt silent. Until Vanessa finally spoke. Maybe they're right. Those 4 words hit harder than any insult. Maybe they're right. Not maybe we'll get through this. Not maybe things will improve. Maybe they're right. I knew exactly what she meant. And from that moment forward, something inside our marriage began dying. Slowly, painfully, irreversibly. I didn't realize it then, but I would soon learn something important. The people who celebrate your success aren't always the people who survive your struggle. And Vanessa was about to prove exactly that. What I didn't know was that within months she would hand me divorce papers. And what she didn't know was that walking away from me would become the single most expensive mistake of her entire life. The moment those words left my mind, I turned and walked toward the mansion. Behind me, I could hear Anthony Brooks and Daniel Carter quietly speaking to Vanessa. Their confidence was still there. But something had changed. A small crack. A tiny uncertainty. Because none of them had expected me to remain calm. Most people panic when lawyers show up demanding money, especially when the amount being discussed is $50 million. I wasn't most people. I had spent the last 5 years solving problems far bigger than this one. The massive front doors opened before I reached them. 2 members of my staff stepped aside respectfully. "Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor." I nodded. Behind me, Vanessa followed silently. The moment she entered the mansion, her eyes widened. She tried to hide it. Failed. The grand foyer alone was larger than our entire apartment had been during the final years of our marriage. Italian marble floors stretched beneath our feet. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked several acres of private property. Vanessa slowed down, looking around, trying not to appear impressed. Anthony and Daniel did the same. The attorneys were clearly trying to remain professional, but even they couldn't completely hide their reactions. Success leaves clues, and there were clues everywhere. I led them through the main hallway, past a wall displaying awards, business recognition plaques, entrepreneurship honors, magazine covers, national speaking engagements, major acquisitions. Vanessa stopped walking. Her eyes settled on one particular magazine cover. My photograph filled the front page. Self-made logistics billionaire on the future of American transportation. She stared at it for several seconds. Anthony noticed. Vanessa. She immediately looked away. We continued walking. As we approached the boardroom, several executives exited. Each one greeted me professionally. Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor. See you tomorrow, sir. Excellent meeting today. Vanessa watched every interaction, every handshake, every sign of respect, every indication that people viewed me differently now. 5 years earlier, nobody treated me that way. 5 years earlier, I was invisible. Now I wasn't. And she couldn't stop noticing it. The boardroom overlooked a private lake behind the estate. The tables seated 20 people comfortably. Screens covered one wall. Financial reports displayed across another. Everything inside the room reflected growth, discipline, results. I sat at the head of the table. Vanessa sat opposite me. Anthony took the chair to her right. Daniel sat beside him. For several moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Anthony opened his folder. Mr. Taylor, we'd like to resolve this professionally. I leaned back. So would I. Excellent. He removed several documents. Our position remained straightforward. I said nothing. Anthony continued. Your current wealth stems from business concepts developed during your marriage. Does it? That is our belief. Daniel slid a document across the table. We've reviewed public records. I glanced down. Business filings, media reports, property acquisitions, investment structures. Nothing surprising, nothing dangerous, nothing useful. I looked back up. Keep going. Anthony folded his hands. Your first company entered the logistics sector. Correct. You worked in logistics during your marriage. Correct. You discussed business ownership during your marriage. Correct. Anthony smiled, as though he had scored a point. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. So your argument is that because I once discussed owning a business, Vanessa owns part of everything I built afterward. Anthony's smile faded slightly. When you simplify it that way, no. Then explain it. He opened his mouth, paused, then carefully chose his words. Our position is that your entrepreneurial foundation was created during the marriage. I couldn't help smiling. Daniel noticed immediately. Unlike Anthony, Daniel wasn't trying to win an argument. He was studying my reaction, trying to understand what I knew. That made him more dangerous. The smartest person in a room is often the quietest one. I looked directly at Daniel. For the first time, he looked away. Interesting. Very interesting. Vanessa finally spoke. You act like I did nothing. I turned toward her. Didn't you? Her jaw tightened. I stood beside you. The statement instantly pulled me back 5 years. Back to the divorce. Back to the apartment. Back to the worst day of my life. I remembered sitting alone after she left. The silence. The emptiness. The humiliation. Most people imagine success starts with opportunity. They're wrong. Success often starts with pain. Pain becomes desperation. Desperation becomes determination. Determination becomes action. And action eventually changes everything. The first year after my divorce was brutal. I failed repeatedly. My first business collapsed within 6 months. My second business never generated profit. My third idea attracted investors, then lost them. Every setback felt personal. Every rejection felt permanent. But I kept going, because eventually I realized something. Nobody cared about my excuses. The market didn't care. Investors didn't care. Customers didn't care. Results were the only language that mattered. Then my breakthrough finally arrived. A regional shipping company needed operational consulting. Nobody else wanted the contract. The company was struggling, losing money, close to shutting down. I accepted the challenge. Not because the money was great, because it was an opportunity. For 4 months I worked nearly every waking hour. 17-hour days. Sometimes 18. I analyzed routes, reduced inefficiencies, restructured processes, eliminated waste. The results shocked everyone, including me. The company became profitable. Word spread. 1 contract became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became 15. Then larger companies started calling, then investors, then partners, then institutions. Momentum changed everything. Once success begins, people suddenly forget all the years they ignored you. They only see the outcome, never the struggle, never the sacrifice, never the loneliness. Across the table, Vanessa watched me carefully. I could almost see the regret forming behind her eyes. Not because she missed me, because she was finally seeing what I became, and more importantly, what she walked away from. Anthony suddenly interrupted my thoughts. Mr. Tallis. I looked at him. We also have testimony. That got my attention. Testimony? Individuals who recall. Conversations during your marriage. Regarding future business ownership. I almost laughed again. Almost. Instead, I remained perfectly calm. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The movement was small, barely noticeable, but it told me everything. Unlike Anthony, he wasn't completely convinced. Good. Because he shouldn't be. Anthony slid another document forward. This supports our position. I looked down, then back at him, then down again. The room became quiet. Very quiet. Vanessa leaned forward. Waiting. Anthony looked confident. Daniel looked cautious. I slowly closed the folder, then smiled. A genuine smile this time. The kind that immediately worried intelligent people. Daniel's expression changed first. Anthony noticed a second later. Vanessa noticed last. And suddenly I realized something. They still thought they were controlling this meeting. They still believed they had arrived prepared. They still believed I was reacting to their strategy. The truth was exactly the opposite. I had been prepared for this conversation long before they arrived. And in less than an hour, every assumption they brought into this mansion was about to collapse. Especially when they discovered the one document I had spent 5 years protecting. The document that would change everything. The document that would change everything sat less than 10 feet away from them. And none of them knew it. Not Vanessa. Not Anthony Brooks. Not Daniel Carter. Especially not Vanessa. Because if she had known that document existed, she never would have driven through my gates. She never would have stood in my driveway demanding $50 million. And she definitely would not have hired 2 expensive attorneys to threaten me. I leaned back comfortably. Anthony mistook my calmness for arrogance. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. There is a huge difference. Anthony folded his hands. Mr. Tallis, unless we're missing something. Our position remains extremely strong. I smiled. You're missing something. What exactly? I pressed a button on the conference table. A few moments later, the boardroom doors opened. My chief legal officer entered carrying a thick black binder. The moment Anthony saw it, his confidence weakened slightly. Daniel noticed it too. Unlike Anthony, he immediately became interested. Very interested. The binder was placed directly in front of me. Nobody spoke. The room suddenly felt smaller. I slowly opened it. Years of records. Years of contracts. Years of evidence. Every important document from the last 5 years. Carefully organized. Carefully preserved. Carefully protected. I slid the binder across the table. Take a look. Anthony immediately began reviewing the contents. At first his expression remained confident, then focused, then confused, then concerned. Daniel leaned closer. His eyes moved rapidly from page to page. Vanessa watched both attorneys nervously. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. What is it? Neither attorney answered. They kept reading, and reading, and reading, because the documents were devastating. Every company formation date, every business registration, every intellectual property filing, every investor agreement, every acquisition, every major contract, every single one. All created after the divorce. Every single one. 5 years ago, Vanessa had walked away. 3 months later, my first company was formed. Everything came afterward. Everything. Anthony cleared his throat, then continued reading. A minute later, he removed his glasses. That was when I knew. He finally understood. The case was dead. Legally dead. Financially dead. Completely dead. Vanessa looked between both lawyers. What is happening? Daniel finally spoke. His voice was much quieter than before. When exactly did the divorce become final? The question wasn't directed at me. It was directed at Vanessa. She looked confused. 5 years ago. What month? She answered ... Daniel immediately found the corresponding section in the binder. Then he exhaled slowly. That reaction told me everything. Anthony saw it too. The room remained silent ... Vanessa became visibly frustrated. Somebody explain what is going on. Anthony closed the binder. For the first time since arriving at my mansion, he looked uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Our argument has a problem. A problem? Several problems. Her face paled. I remained silent. Anthony continued. All major business activity occurred after the divorce. Vanessa stared at him. What does that mean? It means ownership claims become significantly harder to establish. Harder. Anthony looked away. Much harder. I could see the realization beginning to spread across her face. The confidence. The entitlement. The certainty. All slowly disappearing, because for the first time, she understood that this wasn't going according to plan. Not even close. Then I decided to ask a question. One simple question. Vanessa. She looked at me. When was the first time you contacted me after the divorce? Silence. I already knew the answer. Everyone did. She never had. Not once. Not ever. No birthday messages. No holiday greetings. No congratulations. Nothing. 5 years of complete silence. Until the money appeared. Neither attorney said a word. Because they knew exactly where I was going. When did you call me? Nothing. When did you check on me? Nothing. When did you ask whether I was okay? Nothing. I nodded. Exactly. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. For the first time. She looked less like a confident claimant and more like someone realizing a terrible mistake. But I wasn't finished. There was still another truth she needed to hear. Do you know what happened after you left? She remained silent. You think I became successful immediately? Nothing. You think investors suddenly appeared? Nothing. You think banks trusted me? Nothing. I laughed softly. They didn't. Memories flooded back. Sleeping in a tiny apartment, working 18-hour days, getting rejected repeatedly, losing money, failing businesses, starting over, again, and again, and again. Nobody saw those years. Nobody celebrated those years. Nobody helped during those years. Success makes people forget the struggle that came before it, but I never forgot. And neither would Vanessa. Not today. Not ever. Daniel finally closed the binder. His expression said everything. He knew. Anthony knew. The claim was collapsing. Fast. Very fast. Then Anthony asked the question I had been waiting for. Mr. Tallis. I nodded. Yes. Why keep records this detailed? I smiled. Because the answer was simple. Because successful people document everything. The room became silent again. Outside the massive windows. Sunlight reflected across the private lake behind the mansion. Inside the boardroom, Vanessa looked completely lost. Her lawyers looked defeated. And for the first time since they arrived, I realized they still didn't know the worst part. They still hadn't discovered why Vanessa had really come here. But I had. And the evidence proving it was sitting inside another file waiting in my office. A file that would expose everything, including the secret financial crisis Vanessa had desperately tried to hide. The moment I mentioned Vanessa's financial problems, the entire room changed. Anthony Brooks straightened in his chair. Daniel Carter's eyes narrowed. Vanessa looked like someone had suddenly pulled the ground out from beneath her feet. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Vanessa finally broke the silence. What are you talking about? I calmly reached into my briefcase, pulled out another file, and placed it on the conference table. Nobody touched it immediately. Nobody needed to, because the expression on Vanessa's face already told the story. She knew exactly what was inside. Anthony slowly opened the file. His eyes moved across the pages. Then he looked at Vanessa, not as her attorney, as a man looking for an explanation. Vanessa. She looked away. Anthony turned another page, then another, then another. Each page revealed the same thing. Debt. More debt. Missed payments. business failures, foreclosure notices, financial judgments. Daniel eventually leaned over and reviewed the documents himself. His reaction was even worse. He removed his glasses, rubbed his forehead, then sat back in complete silence. The case was over. Everyone in the room knew it. But that wasn't the real reason I had gathered the information. The money didn't matter. The lawsuit didn't matter. What mattered was the truth. I looked directly at Vanessa. When exactly were you planning to tell them? Her eyes met mine. Briefly, then dropped again. Anthony closed the file. Is this why we're here? Vanessa remained silent. That silence answered everything. The attorneys exchanged a look. A very expensive look. Because they suddenly realized something. This was never about justice. Karma. This was never about fairness. This was never about legal entitlement. This was about desperation. Vanessa had heard about my success. She had seen the interviews, read the articles, watched the company grow, and somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that my fortune represented her solution. But success doesn't work that way. You don't leave during the struggle and return for the reward. Life doesn't honor that arrangement. Neither do courts, neither do people. Finally, Vanessa looked up. For the first time all afternoon, her confidence was completely gone. You really built all of this yourself? The question surprised me, not because of the words, because of the tone. There was no anger left, no entitlement, no demand. Only regret. I glanced through the boardroom windows. The lake shimmered under the afternoon sun. Beyond it stood one of the warehouses that started everything. The first property I ever purchased. The first risk that worked. The first proof that my life was changing. No, I answered. Vanessa frowned. No? I didn't build it by myself. The room became quiet. I continued. I built it with mentors. I pointed toward the city skyline. With employees. I pointed toward the company reports. With investors who believed in me. Then I placed a hand against my chest. And with every failure that taught me something, nobody spoke. Because everyone understood the meaning. Success wasn't created in a single moment. It was built one difficult day at a time. One sacrifice at a time. One lesson at a time. Anthony stood first. He extended his hand. The confidence he arrived with was gone. In its place was respect. Mr. Tallis, I believe our business here is finished. I shook his hand. Daniel stood next. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished. Thank you. Vanessa remained seated. Watching. Thinking. Remembering. Eventually she stood as well. For a moment it looked like she wanted to say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe an explanation. Maybe a defense. Instead, she simply nodded. Then turned toward the door. Anthony and Daniel followed. The boardroom doors closed behind them. And just like that, 5 years of unfinished business finally ended. I remained seated for several minutes. Alone. The silence felt different now. Lighter. Cleaner. Complete. My phone buzzed. A reminder appeared on the screen. Community Leadership Scholarship Ceremony. I smiled. Of all the things I had accomplished, that program mattered most. Over the past 3 years, millions of dollars from my companies had funded scholarships, mentorship programs, small business grants, and educational opportunities for young entrepreneurs. That was the legacy I cared about. Not the mansion, not the vehicles, not the money. Impact. Opportunity. Growth. Those things lasted longer than wealth. An hour later, I stood on a stage inside a packed community center. Students filled the audience. Parents sat beside them. Teachers occupied entire rows. As I looked across the crowd, I remembered the man I used to be. The unemployed husband. The struggling dreamer. The person everyone doubted, including himself. Then I smiled. Because failure hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning. Success isn't about proving people wrong, I told the audience. It's about becoming the person you were meant to be. The room erupted into applause, and for the first time that day, I realized something important. Vanessa didn't lose access to $300 million. She lost faith in someone before his journey was finished. And sometimes, that becomes the most expensive mistake of all. Although this story is fictionalized for educational and entertainment purposes, it highlights several real-life principles about personal growth, entrepreneurship, relationships, and resilience. Lessons from Jaffe's journey. This story highlights important lessons about perseverance, personal growth, and long-term success. First, temporary failure does not determine a person's future. Jaffe lost his job, his marriage, and his financial stability, but he refused to give up. His success came from years of persistence, learning, and hard work. Second, character matters more than circumstances. Money can be lost and opportunities can disappear, but discipline, integrity, and determination remain valuable in every season of life. Third, success rarely happens overnight. Most achievements are built through consistent effort over time. While many people only see the final result, they often miss the years of sacrifice, rejection, and preparation that made that result possible. Another key lesson is that true wealth is not measured only by money. Jaffe used his success to support scholarships, mentorship programs, and opportunities for others. Creating a positive impact often becomes more meaningful than financial gain itself. Finally, emotional maturity is choosing dignity over revenge. Instead of humiliating Vanessa, Jaffe allowed the facts to speak for themselves and moved forward with his life. The message of this story is simple. Never judge someone's future by their current situation. Today's struggles do not have to become tomorrow's destiny. With patience, discipline, and resilience, setbacks can become the foundation for extraordinary success.